Okay, so today I'm going to go over how to CAD this sketch in Onshape, or this part in Onshape. And I'm going to be going through step by step. Felix called it the Monstrosity, so that's just what I've named it. But all the dimensions are here, and so we're just going to be recreating this through CAD. So this is how the document will look when you open it up. So we want to start on the front because we are looking at a front view here. So we want to start on the front plane, and we can start with a new sketch. And then the tool that we want to use to make this main body, which is what we're going to starting with. And when I say the main body, I'm talking about like this main frame, not the coils that go around or the holes that are in that frame. That's going to come later. But we're going to start off with just this rectangle, or this cylinder. I'm sorry. And to do that, we're going to cut a rectangle, and we're actually going to rotate it around the center line that we see right here. And that way we are going to have our figure. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go to rectangle tool, and we're going to want to make our rectangle. So the first thing it's going to do is ask us to dimension that top part, right? And so we're going to see that that's 140 millimeters. So we can just make that 140 mm. Make sure to type in mm because otherwise it's going to default to inches, or you can just set your document to millimeters. Either way work, but I'll just do 140 millimeters. And then since we are only going to be making half of this because it's going to be rotated around, even though we see 50 millimeters here, we're actually going to want it to be 25. So 25 millimeters. And then let's zoom in a little bit. And so, okay, we want to horizontal this to this so that we have a constraint, and then we can incident this line onto that. So now everything is black, meaning that everything is fully constrained. Cool. Now what's the next step? We have to create these top parts, right? Because we also need to rotate them. So we can see that their radius is actually 100 millimeters. So again, we can make another rectangle. And so 100 millimeters by 2, so 50 millimeters, because again, we need to divide by 2. And then how thick are these? Well, it's 160 total, and it's 140 there, and there's going to be 10, so that means there's going to be 10 on both sides. So we just leave it at 10 millimeters. And then we do the same thing where we incident this to here. And then to save us from making the same sketch piece again, we can just use the reflect tool or the mirror tool. So mirror, and then we're going to mirror it across this line. And then all of these are going to come down here. And now we have the main frame. I think that's all we really need to do for that. So we can bring that out using revolve. And we're going to choose a revolve axis of this. And you see that we have our part. So just to rephrase, what we did there is we took the part and we basically sketched like a 2D image of it, but only half of it, so that when we rotated it around 360 degrees, it would create the whole thing. So that's one piece done. Now the second step we want to do is we want to create these holes that are across everywhere. So to make these holes, we're gonna first want to make this actual hole on the piece, because we're gonna first need to make the hole, and then we're gonna be able to rotate it all the way around. So we can go to the right plane, and we can make ourselves a hole here. So start a new sketch here, and now we need to look at where this actual hole is. You see that, okay, so we see when we look at the side view that the first hole is on the bottom right here. And then we also know for a fact that the distance between these two holes is 120 millimeters, meaning that the distance of this from the bottom will be 140 minus 120 divided by 2, because there's 2 on the top, so that's going to be 10 above. So we can end up making that 10 above this line right here. So we can make our circle. Am I on the wrong? Yes, I am. Okay, so we can end up making our circle. And so what's the dimension of the circle? Well, we see 10 millimeter diameter. So we just copy that. And then we want to leave this vertically in the center. And then we can dimension this to be so 120 divided by 2, which is 60 away from the center. Of course, remember that 60 millimeters, not 60 inches, because otherwise it'll extend way out. And so that's it. We created our first hole. And so now we need to extrude this out. And so we want to make this hole come out of the sketch. So we're going to use extrude, and we're going to use the remove feature. And so I want it to actually come out this way, and I want it to make sure that it comes out completely. So you can just make this like any huge number, but just do 2 so that it's nice carved out, because that's long enough. And now we have our first hole. And so from there, we can continue on patterning the rest of these holes. So we want to create a helix, right, of these holes all around. Like they need to be patterned all the way up. And so handily enough, Onshape actually has a tool called helix. So we're going to be using that. If you're not familiar with that tool, it's pretty cool. And we're going to be using the height and turn settings. So that means that we can basically select the circular edge, which we have down here. And we can flip this up, right? And so now we get to select a height, and we get to select how many revolutions we want for that height. So as you notice, it's 120 millimeters tall. So we actually can say that the height will be 120 millimeters. And for revolutions, we will only have to keep 4. And you can kind of notice that if you pay attention to how the holes are patterned. It will only be 4 revolutions around. You kind of have to play with this a little bit, but because it's not clearly defined in the sketch how many holes you will need, so you kind of have to do a little bit of guesswork, but it ends up being that you only need 4 revolutions. So we can just leave this like this, and you'll see that we have this nice coiling structure going around our sketch, or around our part. And so now we have that. And after that, you might be thinking, okay, well, we have that, but how do we actually pattern these holes throughout this? Because we just have lines. And so because of that, Onshape has this pretty cool feature called curve pattern, which will, we need to make sure that it's a feature, because this extrude is a feature, and the path to pattern it along is this. And we're going to apply each instance. And it's only doing this twice, but we need to do it 11 times. And so Onshape is going to give you a warning that for the best results, the path start point and the pattern seeder is touching. But in this case, it's fine to do it without. But what it's suggesting is that we move this up here, but it will always keep the relation of your piece with the distance from the helix, so it's fine in this case for sure. So we need 11 instances. Again, it doesn't clearly define this in the sketch, but you can infer and play around with it a little bit and see that it kind of ends up looking like how we want it to if we have 11. So if you didn't have this information before, you could try typing in like 4 and then 5 and then 6 and then see how it changed. And you can just infer that they probably won't be too many just from what you can see from the picture. So we know that there's 11, and now we basically have the holes done. So now we only have one piece left to do, which are actually these coils. And so doing the coils, we're going to need to create another sketch, or we're going to need to create another hole or circle around here. And then we're going to have to use that to helix around. So we're going to still use the helix tool for that, but we can go back to sketch 1 and actually reuse that sketch because it's the hole that you can see right here is still on that same plane. So we can make our hole, and it's notice that it says radius of 5 millimeters, so that actually means diameter of 10 millimeters. And we can put this on the same horizontal axis as that because, again, that's what we see in the drawing. So we can do horizontal H and do that, and you can see that that's 40 millimeters away. So just dimension it to be 40 meters away. And yeah, as for that, I think we're done making our circle. So now it's going to create this other part here. So you're going to actually have to go back into the draw tool and make sure to deselect this because we don't want that circle to be spun around like that. So we just leave it on the sketch for now. And we show this sketch because it's important to see where that circle is. And now we do this helix feature again. So we're gonna, this time we can just go straight up around the whole part. And now this time it's clear that there's only 4 revolutions, right? Because you see the 4 coils. So it's 4 revolutions, and we kind of just leave everything else to be the same. So yeah, you see that it starts on the bottom here, which is exactly where we want it to start. And you can see how this is coming together. The final piece that we're going to use is we're going to need to use this tool called sweep, which essentially copies this circle and it's going to sweep it throughout that line, like in relation to that line. So we end up needing to use sweep. And so the faces and regions that we want to sweep is this. And then the sweep path is here. And so based off that, we end up creating our coils, and that's basically the last piece of the sketch. Again, make sure to, whenever you do this stuff, to merge scope. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You can see how we have created our original sketch. And so like you can look at the multiple views just to make sure that we did it correctly. So you can see from this side, it looks the same. From the front, we can look at it and you can see, oh, it looks about the same. And then there's a couple more. We can look at it on the top. And so we can basically see that our job is correct. So I will quickly revise over all the different steps that we used to complete this. So the first thing we did is we created these 3 rectangles and we rotated them around to create this main body. Then from there, we created a circle on this plane, and we extruded out that circle so that we could create our first hole. And then based off that first hole, you can helix around this first like helix around this part, and then you can curve pattern the circle, which is just going to pattern this around completely. And then finally, we have to do this kind of the similar idea with helix 2, where we're going to be going down from here and we're going to wrap around. And then this time we wrap around the entire part, because if you look at the original sketch, it is also completely around. And then we're going to be, and then we can sweep. And so if you have any questions about what these specific, like if you don't know what sweep does, you can often just Google like sweep on shape, and it will give you an accurate representation of how to use the tool. But hopefully I also walked through like what selections we needed to use. Like for instance, for helix here, you can't really select height if you use this entire plane. So you end up having to use a circle and basing it off that, because say we tried making it off this entire curved surface, we would not be able to get this option called height and turns, which is the one we needed to make sure we had exactly 120 millimeters. And I think that's pretty much it. I hope this was helpful, and you guys can always just ask your build lead or just anyone in SpartaBots in general about, you know, help you're having with this sketch or with this part or future ones. And